Hi friends, and welcome. Thank you for joining me for the pilot episode of the Vintage Dietitian channel. My name is Ashley. I'm a registered dietitian, and I also own an antique business, and I've decided to combine two big loves of my life, food and vintage, and combine them to bring you this. And we're starting with a series based on a book that I picked up a couple of months ago. I was at an antique shop in a place a couple hours near my home, and I found this series of books. And within the series was this, the 52 Sunday Dinners. It's a series from the 1920s, and in this one in particular, it goes through and has Sunday dinners for what they're calculating as 6 people for each month of the year, or excuse me, each week of the year. And they go actually like month by month based on what's in season and in their estimations in the 20s, what is economical. And I can tell you for sure, translated to 2020, 100 years later, it's not so economical at this point. But we'll get into that a little bit more in each episode as we go through this. We're starting in August. And I know it's upsetting for some people probably to start midway through and not start with dinner number 1, but it's August at this point. We're starting where we're at, and we're just going to keep going around until we get through next July and into next August. So thank you so much for joining me, and let's get started with our very first one. For our first dinner, the 31st Sunday dinner menu, that's the first weekend in August, we are doing a slice of ham baked in milk, glazed sweet potatoes, escalloped tomatoes, canned asparagus with French dressing, salt crackers and cream cheese, Charlotte Russe, and it seems to be coffee is on the list for every dinner that I've seen so far. We're going to start on what would be the Saturday and getting some of this stuff made ahead of time so that on the Sunday it's not quite as busy. So let's get started with the Charlotte Russe and we'll go from there. For the Charlotte Russe, it calls for ladyfingers lining a glass dish or mold. We went with a springform pan, and I'm not exactly sure what size we're supposed to use. I just went with a 9-inch, I believe. We'll see if it fills it all the way up or if it overfills it and makes a giant mess. But thankfully, I had one package of ladyfingers in my freezer, which you can see is not quite enough to fill that mold if you can see the inconsistency of some of those other types of cookies and the cookies sitting there on the counter. I went to 6 separate grocery stores in 2 different towns, and I'm in a fairly rural area in Pennsylvania, but I really did not expect to not be able to find ladyfingers anywhere. I don't know if that's something that most grocery stores don't carry anymore, or if it's just something in my little area right here. Like, do you guys have ladyfingers? Is that something people even use anymore, or am I just crazy thinking people should be carrying ladyfingers now? Anyway, I decided to just buy some of these orange chocolate Milano cookies and some of these Walker's shortbread. We'll see if you can see I put 2 of the orange chocolate and 2 of the shortbread there. We'll see if it makes a difference, if you can taste a difference, but you gotta do what you gotta do. And I know in the 20s, if our great-grandmothers hadn't had a certain ingredient, I know they weren't going out to the store to go find it. They were using what they had at home, and that's what we're gonna do here.
For the Charlotte Russe, we're covering a tablespoon of gelatin with a 1/4 cup of cold water and soaking it for 10 minutes. Then, while that's soaking, we're going to scald a 1/3 of a cup of milk and then dissolve it into that gelatin that was soaking. We will stir that gelatin until it disappears and then strain it into a bowl. Then we'll add a 1/3 of a cup of powdered sugar and a teaspoon of vanilla. We're just sifting that powdered sugar there so that no lumps form, and then we're stirring it up. What we'll do next is set that bowl into a pan of ice water and stir it continuously until the mixture begins to thicken. This is where we went wrong. We should have taken it out of the ice water as it just began to thicken, but I left it in there while I got this whipped cream ready. I took a pint of heavy whipping cream and whipped that up while that bowl was sitting in the ice water there. And as you'll see in just a second, the results of that were not ideal. We're going to take the whipped cream, about 1/3 of the amount at a time, and try and stir that in here. You can see about how that's going. You can also see all the water just starting to spill out over the sides. Yeah, there I got smart and pulled it out of the ice water there and began to stir it a little bit more, but it was already too late. Although this was a disaster, we are not going to get rid of it. We're still going to use it just as the women in the 20s would have still used it. We're going to put it into the lined dish there. We'll stick it into the refrigerator overnight. Hopefully it firms up and doesn't turn out to be a sloppy mess. We'll see. You'll find out tomorrow or in about 10 minutes here in real time. And I guess we're just gonna, look at those chunks there. Set it aside and start on the French dressing. This one is super simple. We're just beating together a tablespoon of olive oil, a 1/2 teaspoon of salt, a 1/2 teaspoon of sugar, and a very little paprika. I don't know what a very little paprika is, but that's how much we're using. Once that is mixed up, we're going to slowly add a tablespoon of cider vinegar. And that's it. Next up, on day before prep, we're going to get those cream cheese balls going. We were just moistening that with butter. Why? I don't know. Maybe cream cheese used to be less moist. But after that, we're going to roll those into balls and roll the balls into the cream cheese.
This mound of nutty balls looks great. Chill it in the fridge and let it keep till tomorrow so it's less to do when we're making dinner. It's the day of dinner and we have the ham baked in milk, the glazed sweet potatoes, the escalloped tomatoes, the canned asparagus tips to do, and we have to finish off the crackers for the salt crackers and cream cheese. I'm gonna slap an apron on and we're gonna get going. For the main dish here, it calls for trimming the fat off of this piece of ham. This ham didn't have very much fat, so I bought and used some diced pancetta instead. I'll just mix that with the brown sugar, put it on top of the ham, and then it asks us to turn in a cup of milk. I don't know what that means. I assume it means just pour it over. Then it says, if desired, you could put potatoes in there, and obviously potatoes are always desired, so we're going to go ahead and do that as well. I don't know how small they meant by small, but I have this size potato and this size potato. This is probably still a little too big, but we're gonna throw it in and find out if it cooks all the way through and all of this milk in 40 minutes, 60 minutes. However long this is supposed to take, and we'll cut this really interesting looking potato up as well. The ham has been in the oven uncovered for like 4 minutes, and I'm already like considering pulling it out and turning the heat up and covering it. I'm like, what if it's not done? What if the potatoes are still raw? I just don't think it's right. But in the 1920s, I'm pretty sure they didn't have temperature gauges and all that sort of stuff. So I'm just going to trust the process here, and if they come out raw, I guess we'll just have raw potatoes. But I'm trying to keep in mind there's still 35 more minutes to go, 40 minutes total for this stuff. But man, it's like taking everything in me not to override this recipe and fix it or something. Well, I'm not gonna do it.
We are starting the escalloped tomatoes by toasting some breadcrumbs over the stove. I also assume that the quart can of tomatoes back in the day would have been home canned tomatoes. I didn't have any on hand at the moment, so we just went with these diced tomatoes, and we're going to add the salt, the sugar, the butter, and mix that all up, heat it all up in there. Look at that bubbling, it looks so beautiful. We're just pouring over those breadcrumbs, and then this is gonna go into the oven.
Okay, I think I changed my mind. So I just checked on it, even though I said I wasn't going to. And the milk really isn't evaporating, and if they specified in the recipe that it might evaporate, that indicates to me that it was probably a higher temperature. So I'm thinking maybe the temperature I set it to was a little bit too low, and their stoves back in the day would have been set to like high or whatever the 20s equivalent to that was. So I'm going to bump it up to 400, and hopefully I don't screw this up immensely. Okay, I checked on it again, and I don't think 400 was the right temperature, because that looks scary. We're gonna turn it back down to 350. And like the lovely hostess that I am, I'm going to put everything on the table because my guests have arrived, and I'm going to get these salt crackers into a hot oven with the door open and the heat off, and let those bake and crisp up while we are having our delicious meal. Yeah, looks appetizing. Right, on our table here we have our canned asparagus tips, our ham steaks with milk, and the potatoes, our sweet potatoes, and our escalloped tomatoes with a good brown breadcrumb topping. Let's try them out. Based on the way this menu is reading, I assume we are supposed to serve the ham, the sweet potatoes, and the tomatoes first. And then when looking at the salt cracker and cream cheese recipe, it says that it's supposed to be served with the asparagus tip salad. And it also says that we're supposed to be heating those crackers in the oven while the main part of dinner is being eaten. So I assume we're doing that first. That's maybe the first course, and then the asparagus and the crackers with cream cheese is the second course, and then the Charlotte Russe with the coffee is the third course. Okay, let's give this stuff a try. I'm really hoping that it tastes better than it looks, the ham and potatoes at least. They kind of looked horrendous. Hopefully they taste a little bit better. I will say with the potatoes, they were cooked all the way through. I poked a bunch of them all the way around, including that small, big, whatever size we're assigning to that whole potato, it was cooked through. So let's give this a try. Tastes like ham. Nothing special. It tastes like just a ham steak. It doesn't taste like it was cooked in milk. I'm not tasting any milky flavors or anything like that. Potatoes are good. Actually, whatever the saltiness of all that fat and some of the brown sugar, you can actually taste that maybe a little more in the potato than you actually can in the ham. That's delicious. Let's see how they taste. It's not bad. Texture isn't ideal, but it tastes just like a sweet potato with some sugar on top. All right, our escalloped tomatoes. Again, tastes kind of like all the ingredients that were put into it. I don't really taste any of the sugar in there. I was expecting to. Seeing the sugar in the recipe, I thought that's a little bit weird. I don't like the idea of that in my tomatoes. Although I suppose a lot of people put brown sugar in their sauce when they're making it, so maybe it's not that unappealing, but I don't really taste it. I mostly taste just the acidity of those tomatoes and the breadcrumbs. For me, it feels like a weird combination with the ham, but again, maybe that's just my preference. If you like ham and tomatoes, great, this would be perfect. I feel like the tomatoes don't make sense in this meal. But maybe if I lived in the 1920s, I'd feel differently. All right, our asparagus chips here. Let's try it out with that French dressing. And I'm not sure if I'm supposed to eat the lettuce and or tomato, if it would have been served with the tomato with this, or if it's more of just a bed decoration. So we'll try it without. That is not tasty. However, this is modern day canned asparagus. Maybe back in the 20s when they were home canning everything. I don't personally can asparagus myself. Maybe it was a little more crispy or something like that, but that is not. That's really squishy and for me personally unpleasant. We have the cheese ball with the crackers. I'm not sure what crackers were like back in the 20s. I guess I'm not quite understanding why we put them in the oven unless it's like a hot cold thing. Maybe they like that little bit of a contradiction there, which is great. And I think I'm gonna break this off if I just dip it in there. So, oh no, there we go. Cracker, good. Cream cheese, good. Nuts, good. Everything good here. This is the one I was terrified about. I wasn't sure if it was going to hold its shape. I had a feeling when I pulled it out of the springform pan, it was just gonna fall apart everywhere. And you know what? I'm kind of impressed. I know I only went halfway around with the berries, but we have our little shortbread cookies in there. Yeah, this looks great. Let's see how it holds up when we slice into it. It's holding up okay. I know, it's a little micro piece. It looks really stupid, but it'll taste all the same. Yeah, it's holding up fine. I was a little concerned with the way that Jell-O didn't mix in, or gelatin, excuse me, didn't mix in. I let it get too thick before I mixed in or folded in that whipped cream. I was afraid this might not hold up, but so far it's holding its shape pretty well. Okay, so the flavor is really good. You can't really go wrong with whipped cream, but the chunks of gelatin are just sort of mixed in there, so you get this like chunky, it's like creamy with the whipped cream, but then chunky with the little chunks of gelatin. I kind of like it, but if you are somebody with an issue with textures, you would not like this. You would not like the way I screwed this up. But if you like things like tapioca pudding or bubble tea or something like that, this would be fine. But yeah, note for the future, if you're making this and you decide to use the recipe that I use, don't let the gelatin go until it's thick. Let it go until it has just started thickening. If you enjoyed watching me conquer and absolutely destroy some of those recipes, join us next week. It is the 32nd Sunday dinner menu. It features iced cantaloupe, American chop suey, celery and coleslaw with sour cream dressing, blackberry pie, stuffed baked potatoes, quick cake recipe with caramel sauce, and hot chocolate cream sauce. A nice light dinner for a Sunday. See you next week.